This is a lanky schoolmaster named Ichabod Crane, whose head was stuffed entirely too full of ghost stories and wild superstitions. His greedy heart soon led him to chase a wealthy farmer's daughter, blinding him to a very real danger. Would his foolish bravery cost him his life? Join this eerie midnight ride and uncover the dark mystery waiting in the shadows. A drowsy and enchanted glen, known as Sleepy Hollow, lay hidden nestled among the rolling hills of the quiet countryside. A strange magic hung heavily over the misty valley, making its sleepy inhabitants prone to wondrous dreams and fearful midnight visions. The most haunting legend spoken around the crackling hearth fires was that of a fallen soldier whose head had been carried away by a flying cannonball. Folks whispered fearfully that he rode forth on the blackest and stormiest nights. He always sought his stolen head in the dark woods. Into this quiet and superstitious valley came the curious new schoolmaster. He was tall and exceedingly lanky, with narrow shoulders and long arms that dangled a full mile out of his dusty sleeves. His flat head and huge ears made him look exactly like a skinny scarecrow recently escaped from a frosty cornfield. The nervous man earned his meager living by whipping simple knowledge into the unruly village children, earning barely enough coins to feed his truly massive appetite. The young teacher traveled constantly from farmhouse to farmhouse. He lodged weekly with the generous families of his various young pupils.
Good night, Ichabod.
Our hungry scholar soon set his eager eyes on a blooming lass named Katrina. She was the beautiful only child of a thriving and very wealthy local farmer. The magnificent sight of her father's vast orchards filled the poor schoolmaster with deep and consuming longing. Fat roasted pigs, juicy glazed apples, and shining silver treasures danced vividly in his greedy imagination. He desperately wanted to marry the girl, just to inherit such delicious wealth. However, a highly formidable rival stood squarely in his narrow path. This burly and roaring hero of the entire county was named Brom Bones. Broad-shouldered and extremely mischievous, the handsome lad rode a magnificent black horse and loved nothing more than a clever practical joke. The burly rival stood boldly before the nervous teacher one afternoon and demanded a fair physical fight to settle the vital matter of the maiden's heart. The trembling scholar politely refused the violent challenge, preferring instead to win his golden prize through peaceful and quiet cunning. Whenever the sneaky teacher tried to quietly woo the sweet girl, the brawny lad would quickly fill the schoolhouse chimney with blinding thick smoke. He even trained a scruffy hound dog to howl terribly beneath the pretty maiden's bedroom window every single night. Crisp autumn winds painted the surrounding woods in fiery gold when a tired messenger arrived bearing a highly coveted paper invitation. A grand and joyous quilting frolic was scheduled to be held that very evening at the sprawling Van Tassel mansion. The incredibly excited schoolmaster dismissed his eager students an entire hour early. He spent an absolute age brushing his rusty black suit and arranging his sparse brown hair before a cracked piece of mirror. Borrowing a bony and vicious old plow horse named Gunpowder, the eager suitor rode proudly toward his glowing romantic future. The lively indoor scene at the sprawling farmhouse was a dizzying paradise of warm food, bright music, and echoing laughter. Towering heaps of sweet honey cakes, juicy roasted fowls, and perfectly spiced hams covered the long wooden dining tables. The lanky teacher ate happily and greedily until he could barely breathe. Then he led the pretty maiden in a joyous country dance, his long limbs flying wildly about like a frantic green grasshopper. Brom Bones sat brooding quietly in the dark corner of the crowded room. His heavy heart burned fiercely with bitter and consuming jealous rage. As the lively evening dancing finally ended, the older village men gathered by the warm, crackling fire to weave dark and terrifying tales. They spoke in hushed and trembling voices of the terrible Headless Horseman who patrolled the dark dirt roads near the old church bridge. The gray-haired farmers warned everyone listening that the ghostly rider would ruthlessly chase any traveler foolish enough to cross his cursed nocturnal path. The terrified but fascinated schoolmaster listened closely, with incredibly wide and unblinking eyes. When the weary party guests finally departed for their own homes, the hopeful suitor lingered behind to officially secure his sweet, romantic victory. Yet something went terribly wrong in that quiet and shadowy parlor room. The lovely girl politely explained that she could absolutely never marry him, offering only her friendly pity in return for his grand and greedy hopes. He walked out into the chilly night air with a heavy and utterly broken spirit. The suspense is at its absolute peak. Before we discover the heartbroken schoolmaster's ultimate fate, join our community so you won't miss what happens next. The midnight sky grew darker than a raven's glossy wing as the rejected lover steered old Gunpowder slowly toward his empty home. Every snapping dry twig sounded exactly like a terrifying ghostly footstep. A chilly and biting wind moaned sadly through the towering and skeletal oak trees. He slowly approached the dreadful muddy swamp, his fragile heart hammering wildly against his bony ribs. Something incredibly huge and dark loomed suddenly in the misty shadows by the winding wooden brook. It was a massive and completely silent horseman, mounted securely on a powerful black steed. The trembling teacher frantically urged his tired mount forward, but the dark stranger kept perfectly even with him at every single pace. He tried desperately to sing a loud, holy psalm, yet his hopelessly dry throat refused to make a single comforting sound. The thick gray clouds parted slowly in the sky to reveal a truly terrifying and unforgettable sight. This giant unknown rider was completely and horrifyingly headless. Its severed, ghostly head rested carelessly on the worn leather pommel of the heavy saddle. Absolute terror seized the poor trapped scholar. He viciously kicked his old horse into a desperate and flailing gallop through the muddy dirt. The heavy iron hooves of the phantom steed thundered violently and loudly right behind them. They raced madly toward the old stone church bridge, the sacred sanctuary where wicked spirits were historically supposed to vanish forever. The frantic schoolmaster looked back over his shoulder, hoping fiercely to see the wicked goblin disappear in a bright flash of holy brimstone. Instead, the monstrous rider stood tall in his iron stirrups and hurled his detached flying head directly at the fleeing, panicked man. The massive flying object struck the fragile teacher's skull with a sickening and brutally hollow crash. He tumbled headlong and helplessly into the powdery road dust. The warm morning sun rose brightly over Sleepy Hollow, but the lanky schoolmaster was absolutely nowhere to be found. A frantic local search party eventually discovered the wandering old horse munching peacefully on wet morning grass. They found a terribly trampled leather saddle and a single, violently shattered pumpkin lying mysteriously near the wooden bridge. The frightened scholar had vanished completely from the earth, leaving the confused town to gossip endlessly about his magical midnight disappearance. Brom Bones shortly married the lovely maiden, always bursting into a hearty and incredibly knowing laugh whenever the crushed pumpkin was mentioned. True and lasting danger often hides safely within our own foolish and greedy imaginations. Unchecked greed and wild superstition make an exceedingly easy target for a remarkably clever rival.